Hi everyone! Welcome back. Sorry it has been a while since I last uploaded. Lots of things have been happening, but here I am. So this is going to be my February 2021 wrap-up video. I'm quite excited for it. I read 8 books this month, so let's jump right into it. All right, the first book I read this month was Are Women on the Ground? Essays by Arab women reporting from the Arab world, and it's edited by Zahra Henkir. I rated this book 5 stars. I also talked about it a little bit in my reading vlog that I posted. It was very well done. I thought that the essays were chosen very well. I really appreciated the opportunity to learn about the intersection between the author's identity as women, but also as Arab women. I feel like that's where this book hits its stride, in particular, when the essays are able to capture that intersection really well. So 2 of my favorite essays were An Orange Bra in Riyadh by Donna Abu Nasser and On a Belated Encounter with Gender by Lena Atala. So these 2 essays I think do a really great job of not only highlighting that intersection, but also crafting a narrative around a specific idea, which allows it to be well-paced. So the On a Belated Encounter with Gender is about the author's relationship with her own gender, sort of going from like her childhood, specifically her relationship with her father, through exploring like queer theory, gender theory, and so that was really compelling. And then the other essay, An Orange Bra in Riyadh, not only was very informative because I learned that in Saudi Arabia at the time of writing, women were not allowed to sell undergarments or lingerie, so they would have to go into stores and deal with men when trying to purchase lingerie. And the author describes in pretty excruciating detail how humiliating some of these experiences could be. But the fact that the whole essay was centered on this object made it very well paced and very, I don't know, I just thought it was super well written. I feel like I don't have the words to describe it right now, but I would highly recommend this book. I gave it 5 stars, so consider reading it. The next book that I read is The Yellow House by Sarah M. Broom. So this one has been on my shelf for a really long time because I have a pretty fraught relationship with some of the topics discussed in this book. I might make a whole video about this book at some point, but until then, that's all I'm comfortable saying about it. The author is charting the history of her family, specifically through the sort of centerpiece, which is the Yellow House. So she talks about what it's like to be Black in New Orleans through the ages, specifically through like the early 20th century into contemporary life. And she also has a very intense but important discussion of Hurricane Katrina, and specifically how structural racism and institutional racism made the impact of Katrina much worse for her family and others like it. And it also highlights a neighborhood in New Orleans that is often forgotten, New Orleans East, which was also really interesting. So I will say more about this in another video if I choose to make it, but I would still recommend reading it. All right, the next book I read was an ebook called A World Between by Emily Hashimoto. I rated it 4 stars only because I feel like I was just not the intended audience for the book. So the book itself is about, it's sort of when Harry met Sally meets 2 queer women, is how the book is pitched. I had some problems with the way that queerness was represented in this book. I feel like there was a lack of empathy extended between the 2 main characters, which led to a communication barrier, which was really frustrating to read. And I also feel like the characters didn't really change much throughout the book, even though it's supposed to span like a decade or so. And that's sort of what I found appealing about When Harry Met Sally, is that the reason they fall in and out of love is because they're different people at different points in their life. Whereas the characters in this book just felt like they were the same people who were experiencing the same issues, and that's why they just weren't able to make it work at different points throughout the book, and that was particularly frustrating. So, like, the characters do change. Like, the only instance I can think of where the characters change beyond, like, coming out as queer is drinking alcohol, which honestly, I was pretty horrified by the change, because this one character goes from not drinking alcohol at all, being a very staunch advocate for being sober, and there's hinted family backstory at alcoholism, and then she just like, when the other main character meets her later, she's like, yeah, I drink now. And I was like, are we gonna talk about this? Like, why have you changed your mind? Like, but yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's for some other people, so that's why I rated it 4 stars. Maybe I'll change it to 3, because honestly, I wasn't a huge fan. The next book that I read is Plain Bad Heroines by Emily M. Danforth. I loved this book, y'all. I gave it 5 stars. It is this epic gothic horror that transcends time. It starts with a timeline in 1902, and then you sort of like move between that timeline and a contemporary timeline, where the characters are making a movie about the events that happened in 1902. It's so good. All of the main characters are queer. I think all of them are also women, which is just so great to read. There's also discussion of an actual historical queer person, Mary McLean, which is where the title of the book comes from, Plain Bad Heroines. Mary McLean is like, I just want to read more books that feature plain bad heroines that I can relate to. And Emily M. Danforth is like, I've got you. Literally with this like 600 pages. I thought it was really fast paced. I was very intimidated by the length, but I had heard such good things about it, and I thought it was very well done. It's by the same author who wrote The Miseducation of Cameron Post, and I feel like that book was sort of like a YA type story, like coming of age story. This book shows that she has the range, man. Like, she covered, like, there's basically like a pantheon of like main characters, and they all feel like the proper care has been taken to flesh them out and to discuss them. There's so many cool plot twists. There's like the elements of gothic horror are just incredible. Highly recommend. The next book that I read is Shirley Jackson's Let Me Tell You, which also gothic horror vibes, of course. Shirley Jackson is like the queen of gothic horror. I picked up this book because I got into the Haunting of Hill House Netflix series, and then I was like, okay, I gotta read the original, which was also fantastic. Then I read her novel The Sundial, which I really appreciated as well. So I was like, okay, I gotta just like get an anthology so I can read a bunch of her stuff. And I really enjoyed it. It is an anthology that's put together by her children, I believe. It does feature some nonfiction stuff that I sort of like skimmed, but the fiction stuff is super, super compelling. There's a lot of really great short stories. Oh, she also wrote The Lottery, by the way. I can't believe I forgot to mention that. And I read that in high school, and I thought that that was really good. So yeah, I would highly recommend this. So the next book that I read was another ebook. It was Uncanny Valley, which is a memoir by Anna Wiener, I think. This one was good. I give it 4 stars. It basically talks about her experience in Silicon Valley, transitioning from working in the publishing industry in New York to moving to San Francisco. And because she has a very high degree of self-awareness, I thought the book was really well done. She's very self-reflective and offers really unique, to me at least, insights on the industry and like startup culture, and particularly women in tech is something that she discusses a lot. So I really appreciated that. The last third sort of like fell off for me. She tries to tie in the 2016 election, but I feel like she doesn't necessarily do that super well. And I was more interested in her personal story. Like, whenever she tries to draw bigger conclusions, I was like, you're sort of losing me. Like, I'm here for you to tell me about your experience working in Silicon Valley. But overall, I thought it was really well done. The writing is fantastic. It is based on an article. I realized as I was reading the part that is included in the article that it is based on an article. She just sort of like turned it into a memoir, which was really cool. The next book that I read, oh geez, was The Fixed Stars by Molly Weisenberg. I did not like this book. I rated it 2.5 stars only because, one, I feel bad for authors when I give low ratings, so I try not to give ratings lower than like a 3. And also because the writing was good. Like, I'm not gonna lie, like, she's a good memoirist, but oh boy. oh boy, I could do a whole rant review video about this book, but the main points that I want to make are: one, her discussion of the queer community lacks an understanding of queer history. Specifically, that shows up in her relationship with Nora, where Nora says that she's a butch, not a stone butch, but that she doesn't like to receive any sexual attention. She just likes to give it. And Molly's just basically like, I feel bad, and I'm gonna project that like discomfort onto my partner and make her feel bad about this boundary that she's set. And I was just like, how do you think that that's an okay thing to do? Also, her relationship with her husband is just really hard to read, because her husband like willingly opens up their relationship and is like, look, like my one rule is that I don't want you to fall in love with anybody else. And she's like, don't worry, it's fine. But then she starts falling in love with Nora, and she doesn't tell him, and she just keeps going, and then she eventually asks him for a divorce, and he's like, are you kidding me? Like, this is the whole, like, obviously I want her to like live her truth, but I also feel like a lot of the problems that she encounters in the book are because of her inability to communicate and her inability to be honest with herself. My final point is that the message of the book is that queer identity, specifically like queer like women, their identity is fluid. Like, it's not like this static thing. And I'm like, okay, that's an interesting take. Like, you're pushing back against the born this way theory. But she basically just cherry picks like existing queer theory that supports her hypothesis. Like, she doesn't explore like the history of born this way theory, or like why coming out is a very political act, and like what the history of that is. So I just was not a fan of this book. Let's move on. So the next book I read, I loved. It is Transition Baby by Tori Peters, and it is wonderful. The writing is incredible. The characters are very well fleshed out and nuanced. There's discussions of motherhood and queerness and what it means to be a woman, particularly a trans woman. And the characters are just messy, which I love. It is wonderful. Like, it's definitely a very intense read. Like, a couple of like the major content warnings are discussions of suicide, abortion, miscarriage, abuse, violence, slurs. So it's definitely a very intense read, but I would highly recommend getting it. Also, I would highly recommend, if you have the resources, to buy this yourself, because you will support a trans author. Anyway, thank you for sitting through this very ranty wrap-up video. As you can tell, I had lots of feelings about the books that I read this month, but thank you for tuning in, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.